You guys can just, if you have a mic, you can share and then we'll share my screen. Good afternoon. Is this working? Yeah, great. All right. Hi, everyone. I didn't even get to say hi to everyone before we started, but welcome to our National Girls and Women in Sport Day. I'm Carrie LaCrum. I'm the director of the Center for Sport Leadership, and we're doing this event today in collaboration with the Brandcenter School of Business VCU alum to make it just a really cool day to celebrate something very important to probably everybody in this room. So again, I just want to say welcome. I'm just going to moderate this and let the stars shine over here. So I would just start by saying that it is a really exciting time for women's sports. I think most people can agree that we have some swell that we hope becomes sort of just the usual instead of something fun and exciting right now. There's just a lot of oh, there it is. I was like, what is this noise? Okay. Yeah, there's just a lot of really exciting things we're seeing in terms of media and pro opportunities for women and selling out arenas and stadiums and having to move to bigger venues and just so many really great things that we've probably thought should be the case all along, and now they are. So let's keep that going. So again, today we're just sort of celebrating that, and we thought a really great way to do it would be to have a panel of some excellent women in sports. Everyone up here is an alum of the Center for Sport Leadership and or the Brandcenter. And so I'm going to start by letting them introduce themselves and talk to you about where they are, what they're doing in their career. And then we'll just move into some questions for each of them, followed by, of course, open question and answer. So if you have a burning question, we will make time for that. So welcome to our panelists who have come from across the country to be with us today. So probably the biggest thank you to these 5 women up here. And we're going to start with Trista.
Thanks, Carrie. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. Good to see everybody. My name is Trista Langdon. I'm one of the OGs of the program. I graduated in 2005. So it's about to be a 20-year anniversary. Maybe Carrie will give me some shoes. But my current role right now, I'm Senior Vice President of Operations and Guest Experience for the Washington Commanders, which ultimately means I operate our venues in Northwest Stadium and our Commanders training facility in Ashburn, Virginia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Crawford. I'm a 2014 CSL grad. It's my first time back in Richmond in 11 years, so appreciate everybody coming out today. I currently am the Assistant Athletic Director for Annual Giving and Stewardship at Colorado State University, and I am a lifelong college athletics career here. So started out in ticket operations when I was a 20-year-old undergrad and worked in ticket ops for really up until the last 4 months, and then decided to move over into the development space and over in Fort Collins. So it's a little bit about me, and thank you guys for coming today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Whitlock. I am currently the Associate Director of Championships and Operations at America East Conference up in Boston. I'm a 2021 dual degree grad of the CSL. So I was lucky enough to spend 2 years here. Unfortunately, those 2 years were during COVID, but I had a really good time here, and I'm really excited to be back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Danyell Monroe. I am the most recent graduate, 2024 CSL grad. Currently the Baltimore Ravens ticket operations and services annual intern. So learning a lot. I started off in ticket operations during undergrad and kind of just evolved in that space.
Hey guys, I'm Val Middleton. I am actually not an alum, but I went to Syracuse and now I've been serving since 2019 on the Directors Council at the Brandcenter. Most recently, I was Executive Vice President of SC30, overseeing athlete partnerships and digital marketing. SC30 is Stephen Curry's company overseeing his brand partnerships, and then we've expanded out to include early stage companies as well as other athlete representation and management. So excited to talk to you guys.
So you can see we have a lot of really great experience up here, very different experiences. And so looking forward to hearing a little bit from each of them today. So I want to start with one broad question that anyone can answer. And then I have some individual questions. So we make sure we hear some good stuff from everyone. So I wonder if we can generally just talk about ways that as you have started or gone through your career connected to sport, of how you have felt empowered by other people and or been able to do that for others. So if you can just give us an example of a situation or an instance where you either felt like you were being empowered by others to succeed or were able to do that for other people in the industry. Anybody feel compelled to start?
I'll start.
Great.
I would say starting as a ticket office assistant back in 2022 under another CSL graduate, Sean Moran. It was kind of like my first like big break in sports. And so I didn't expect to like still be in ticket ops now, but definitely like learned a lot under him, going from an assistant up to like a graduate assistant and just like learning all that I can. Of course, ticket operations really isn't anybody's passion usually, but I definitely felt empowered by him because he always gave me like something new to learn. And that kind of like solidified for me that like I belonged in that space and I was able to just continue learning. Even if it wasn't ticket operations that I liked, I was able to still connect in the sports world and just continue learning.
Then Val will come to you next.
Yeah, so I think there's been a number of times throughout my career where I have felt empowered. I've had some really great leaders that have empowered me throughout my career. I think one thing to know is I've had some really amazing men leaders that have empowered me, which I think is important. I've had some really strong women leaders in my life as well, but I've had some men that have been amazing leaders and have really empowered me in multiple times throughout my career. I think most recently stepping into a new role for the first time outside of ticket operations and moving into the fundraising side of things. My 4th day on the job was my boss's last day. And so that's a little scary when you're coming into a new role. But both my athletic director and my deputy athletic director, especially my deputy AD, Scott, he really entrusted me, having only been on the job for a few days, to really step into a leadership role in that area. And even as we went through our bowl game, which was the first bowl game we'd gone to in 7 years, I was really able to kind of take a leadership role, and they really entrusted me to lead all of our development efforts during that time along with our team. But that was a really big moment of empowerment for me to have a leader that had only, known me for a few weeks, but, I had jumped right in and started making an impact, and they, empowered me to be a leader in that area. I think too, another thing throughout the course of my career is, stepping in. I think in college athletics, there's been turnover, and especially during COVID, there were times where, we weren't fully staffed, and I jumped in and put on a hat that I didn't normally wear and helped in areas that maybe didn't fall directly in my purview. But those moments really empowered me to step out of my comfort zone and to take on new challenges.
Yeah, that trust that you can get from really exceptional leaders has been a through line for me as well. And actually, I remember, I've had a lot of moments as well with some male counterparts that were really supportive. Female leaders as well have been pretty fortunate, but there was most recently just going from an agency landscape for my Brandcenter folks in the room, going from like an agency landscape and transitioning into then being given the keys of the kingdom to build Curry brand within the walls of Under Armour. That was a pretty big leap. And I realized it was more about my own internal kind of like battle of making sure like I had a little imposter syndrome. I knew I was capable, but would I be able to show up? And I realized the environment that I stepped into was what made all of the difference in the world. It was a really supportive SWAT team of 4 people that were given this almost impossible mission to say, hey, go build a legacy brand inside of this behemoth of Under Armour. You had a CEO who had a different perspective from the athlete that we were serving. But again, it was almost the barriers were so high of the environment that became the empowerment for me. It was like, all right, you don't think we can do this? Let's go like balls to the walls, like, let's just run through. Let's by any means necessary, let's just try to drive at it. And there was also like kind of the safety in knowing that it could fail, but also it could be exceptional. And that environment was what created, I think, the most empowering kind of moment that kind of comes to mind for me.
Agree with what all the ladies have said, but I will add one piece to this. And as quickly as sports and the sports business is evolving, I did have great leaders to empower me, but it was also that they don't have time to walk you through each step of how to navigate this industry. It moves fast, and they're looking for people that are going to jump in and just figure it out, and as you go, and empower yourself to figure it out. There's no book to this, so we're getting to learn some really great structure and institutional knowledge here that you can apply into your next jobs, but there's not going to be probably a lot of opportunity for somebody to sit you down and go step by step on how you do this job. The best way to do it is just jump into the fire, figure it out with your peers, and look for ways that you can actually improve it upon just keeping it steady state, and that's where you find your value.
I think my favorite example of this was my second year in my grad assistantship. I was a facilities and operations GA. We were playing both the fall sports that we couldn't play because of COVID and spring sports, and finishing basketball season. So staffing was a bit of a nightmare. And so I was able to take on women's lacrosse as my sport as the primary game manager, and a role that I certainly didn't feel ready for. But Taylor, my boss at the time, really pushed me to take that step. And so we walked through the million questions that I had and all of the what if scenarios. And we literally watched game films so that I knew how to operate the shot clock, and so I could feel comfortable doing it in that moment. But I'm so grateful to her to have pushed me in that moment, because like looking back now, like that's the start of my career. And all of my internship experience and GA up until that point were stepping stones. But when I look back now of running events on the regular, for me, that's where it all started and really built my confidence to make it to this point.
Okay, I'm going to stick with you, Sierra, if that's okay, because of what you were just talking about. So a lot of the women mentioned having really great leaders in their lives, often male leaders that were empowering them. Sierra, you have only ever had female bosses, starting with your GA up till now, which is still pretty rare in the sport industry. And so I hope that you could maybe talk a little bit about that, but then also, what do you think this signals for women in sport?
Yeah, I mean, I can take it a step even further back, honestly. Like both of my internships, I was hired by women and worked under women. All of my coaches in college were women. Every step of the way, I've had women who empowered me and also showed me examples of what I could do in this industry. Which felt a little bit weird, because in my undergrad classes, I also studied sport management, and I was one of 3 or 4 girls in these big sport management classes. And I was like, this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a reoccurring issue, until it wasn't. And it's been really cool. And it's almost been something that like I didn't notice happening until my boss left last year, and we got down to the last 2 candidates, and we had a male candidate and a female candidate. And I think both of them would have been great in that role. And I was just thinking about like who was going to be my recommendation. And I had this moment where I was like, I've never worked for a man. Like what would that even look like? And it's just the opposite of what I thought my experience was going to be working in the sports industry. And so to me, it speaks to the change that's happening in this industry. And I know that that is not everybody's experience, and I don't want to negate that, because there's a ton of work that still needs to be done. But I think we're seeing more inclusive spaces where you see more representation of women, more representation of people of color, of underrepresented groups. And so I'm really excited to see that. And I hope that as we continue to prioritize that, then my experience is no longer the exception to the rule.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Val, I'm going to hop over to you. So it seems like in conversations we've had that you've really taken control of your own career and journey, made really conscious choices about what's the right move for you in that moment. Which I think is sometimes hard to do. Like you sometimes just get in a role and keep moving up the like natural path without really thinking about what should I be doing? Is this the right next move? What do I want out of my next step and actually my life even outside of work? So I wondered if you could talk to us about what does reimagining your skill set look like in the industry, and how can you continue to take personal ownership over that for yourself?
Yeah, a lot of the reimagination has had to do, one, with like my curiosity of like, why are things the way they are? Why are companies built the way they are? Why is the brief this way? Why are these athletes aligned with these partners? Why is the front office making this decision? And so part of that is like a curiosity to understand that. And I've realized only now, where I am in my career, looking back, like I can find the red thread. If you had told me at the beginning of my career that this was going to be my trajectory, I would have been like, that's crazy. Like, how did I get there? I started as a producer at the Martin Agency. Actually, I started as an executive or an admin at the Martin Agency. But the other part of it is also family. So, you know, I have 3 kids. I'm a mom to 3 under 11. So how do you reconcile that with the pace of sport and pace of culture? And you just find ways to do it. So those were kind of like the 2 catalysts. But when I look back, you know, I never had ambitions to be a marketer. I had, or like partnerships lead. I was a filmmaker in school. And that's where I ended up at the Martin Agency. But I started to realize what like my superpower was. So I can just say, like, as you start to move through like your different careers and like what like sparks you, just like note it and like write down, like, I feel like I'm like really good at this. I feel like I'm really good at anticipating needs. That was my superpower when I was a producer. I could anticipate needs and I could always pull teams together and create, you know, creative output. I could always execute. Like those became like the things I started to hang my hat on, not my title, not who I worked for. And what I realized is those are completely exportable. So from the Martin Agency, the fact that I could anticipate needs and actually make things became what took me to San Francisco, working for early stage companies in various industries. So we were kind of the brand support and the incubated marketing team for early stage companies around the 2012 era, where you just had a lot of tech bros that didn't understand audience and market and marketing. And so again, found that my superpower became a real benefit to those founders, sitting alongside of them saying, okay, how do you build an organization for you so that you can get off the ground and get to your next raise? And then from there, realized I was building a lot of value with these companies. And so again, just don't be afraid to mark down like your wins along the way, because you can get into a mode where you're like, what is my value? What is my identity? What are all these things? But like write it down. And I realized that I'm creating value. And now we have investors that want to invest in these companies. And so got to wear an investor hat and raised a round for our studio. And then life moves fast and needed to come back to East Coast with 3 babies and realized that I could still support like my team on the West Coast. So that was kind of like an aha moment of, hey, I actually can work with my teams remotely even before the COVID times. That's a win. And then settled at Under Armour. And the thing about Under Armour was they were looking for an entrepreneurial spirit. They were looking for somebody who understood the startup engine, who had that like engine within them. So I was a marketer who sat within the product organization to build Stefan's legacy brand over there. So the entrepreneurial like kind of hat that I was able to gain working with those early stage companies became that kind of like pivot point into the next. And I say all that to say like, the common threads of these strengths will supersede any like title that you have. And I think the other thing is just the relationships you build along the way are so important. That's how then I stepped out of Under Armour and then started working with Stefan directly and a handful of other athletes representing them on the NIL and NBA side. So it's, again, just, I think it's not so much the title, it's not even the industry. You know, I've been in beauty, I've been in fintech, I've been in fertility. I just happened to land in sports for the past 7 years and have loved it and can't quit it. But it's really about just knowing yourself and the value that you bring.
Awesome. Thank you. You're the second woman today I've talked to who's used the term superpowers in a similar way. We have the School of Education just hired a new dean who starts next month. And I was texting with her this morning because randomly I know her unrelated to VCU. And I said, how are you feeling about like all of this, the move cross country? And she said, I've never had to tap into my superpowers more. So I just mentioned that because you have to know what they are to be able to then utilize them effectively. So students, now's the time, an early career, like start figuring out what is the uniqueness you bring that you can then continue to build on and then like make yourself irreplaceable. So I'm actually going to shift to Trista now because my question for her is about making yourself irreplaceable in your organization. So I love this story, and Trista knows. She's probably like, stop talking about that. But the first job Trista took really was like essentially an administrative assistant role. She had a master's degree. Like, I think most students would be like, I'm not going to be someone's quote unquote secretary. It was when the Charlotte Hornets Bobcats were just starting to build their arena, and it just seemed like the first step into an industry she wanted to be in. And I've always been so impressed that you take that job that a lot would be like, that's not, I'm overqualified for that, and basically continued to get promotions because you just did what needed to be done and showed people that like, you need me here and you need me for a bigger role, and have obviously then shifted over time from NBA to NFL. So my question for you is, can you talk to us about your approach to work and just your outlook on how you do that? How do you make yourself sort of irreplaceable to an organization? My words, irreplaceable.
Right. Thank you. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for that very gracious introduction. I will say that what I've determined, some of my superpowers are seeing the gaps and finding out how to fill the gaps. I didn't know immediately leaving the program what in sports I wanted to do. I know I want to be in sports. I played sports. I grew up around sports. Everything I want to do is sports, but what? I don't know. I'm not super creative. I'm not necessarily going to be this great marketer, and come up with these amazing campaigns. But, what is going to be fulfilling for me and also fulfilling for the company that I'm working for to create value for them. So to Carrie's point, I originally took my externship with the Charlotte Bobcats expansion team at that time. The old Hornets were playing their last season in the old Charlotte Coliseum prior to moving the team to New Orleans. And then there was going to be an arena being built at that time. And so I originally started, as Carrie mentioned, the executive assistant to the general manager that was going to be the general manager and the COO who was building those stadiums, that arena. Now, what I didn't know at that time is that actually gave me vision to pretty much start to finish of what it took to build, open, and operate a facility at that time. And because I was the first employee other than the COO and the SVP, I was a part of hiring all of the directors and the integral part, and could see, how searching for the appropriate talent to represent you and to bring these home is really my superpower, is what I learned. I learned that if I can find the right people to do the job well, and hopefully a little bit autonomous to them, and I can empower them and develop them, that is ultimately one of the keys to success. And that's what my supervisor at that time saw in me, that I could do that. And, I will take little snippets off what all the ladies say, but Val said it the best. It's about your curiosity to learn. If you get in a place where I do marketing, and that's what I do, and stay in your tunnel. I call it a lot at my job, like we have to get out of our tunnels. You got to see things a little bit more broader. And it's really important, especially as sports is evolving, to understand that it is a business too. You have to understand what that means and what makes it all tick? What makes the game go well? There's a lot of other supporting factors other than just the athletes and the coaches on the field. Now, as a leader, I do think I'm a coach because each individual or leader that I bring on is its own person, and they're going to lead their own team, and you have to coach and develop them as individuals also to kind of fit in your broader plan. But how I ended up kind of in what Carrie's world saying, making myself invaluable, is I didn't allow myself to ever get in one tunnel. I wanted to know a little bit, maybe not everything, but a little bit about everything. So every conversation that I could overhear or that I could be a part of, I knew what they were talking about. I could bring something to the table. I can speak educated enough about it to understand and be respected there. And that came from the small stuff like spending time with engineers and the electricians and the people who make the seats and the conversion team and the people who set up the concerts. The little things that make the bigger picture happen is what I need to know. So most of my career then, while at the Hornets Bobcats Arena, was event management. I started as an event coordinator after my admin role, and then I was an event manager, and then I was a director and a senior director, and then I was a VP, kind of running the whole thing. But each piece of it and starting at the beginning gave me the broader picture where I didn't isolate myself to all I know how to do is operations, all I know how to do is production and construction. I knew about food and beverage, I knew about ticketing, I knew about the P&L that makes the building run. And I would say that is probably the thing that's been most beneficial for me over. It's early on trying to get a bigger understanding about how the whole industry, whole process, whole organization works. So everything I do has a reaction on somebody else. And it's important to understand what that is, especially when you're involved in some of these larger scale events and organizations. If you sit in your tunnel, then it's a little bit tricky to navigate the industry too and really find out where your niche is.
Super, thank you. I'm hopping over to Danyell. You ready down there? Okay. So Danyell, you're our most recent grad. Less than a year ago, you finished at VCU, and so are in your very first real role in the industry. And we have a lot of students in here today. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you feel like you've made the successful transition from being a student to having a full-time job, maybe what you have learned in that short amount of time. What do you think students should think about in trying to successfully start their first job?
I think the first important piece of it was figuring out like my boundaries, where I wanted to go. I'm born and raised in Virginia, so I knew I didn't want to go too far. Luckily, I got the opportunity to move to New Jersey for 3 months from an internship last summer. So I kind of got that feel. I was like, okay, I know 6 hours is a little too far. So I knew that I wanted to do professional sports. And so figuring out the logistics for myself, I think, was a little bit easier to figure out where I wanted to go. I got a little bit lucky, of course, with 2 of my supervisors being connected to the NFL. So of course, that won't be everyone's luck there, but you can definitely still make those connections. And I think I did a great job of not only relying on the connections that I had with the people I was close to, but also just taking the time to just reach out to literally anybody. And then once I figured out that where I wanted to go, I needed to kind of like figure out how I was going to pave my way. And so, of course, like all throughout undergrad, it was kind of like this work culture that was like, just keep your head down and do the work and you'll make your way. But I think over the last, almost a full year now, don't keep your head down. It's kind of what I've learned is like, you want to keep your head up and figure out, okay, I know that ticket operations isn't where I want to be forever, but keeping my head up and looking at different departments, reaching out to people across the organization and figuring out okay, I like learning new systems. I love like figuring out new processes. So I think maybe something a little more technical is where I want to go. And so not keeping my head down and just getting the work done, doing the grunt work that every intern hates, and but really like embracing that grunt work and figuring out how I can make my supervisor's life a little more easier. I think that's what's really like helped empower myself to like keep going forward and figure out what exactly I want to do.
Awesome. Keep your head up. That's really great advice. Okay. And Kelsey, so as you shared at your intro, you've worked for several different institutions in college athletics in different roles. I was hoping you could talk to the group a little bit about what it takes to acclimate to a new role and culture as people are making these career moves. And then also, big question here, but how do you find balance, especially given how demanding college athletics specifically is? I mean, you work every sport, every event, every season. It's a little bit different than working for one pro team that has a sort of condensed season. Yes, exactly. So I know that's two questions. Can you talk a little bit about that? Trista says there's no off season.
Yeah, I think those are great questions. Like, I'll start with the acclimating to a new culture, and a new role. Like Carrie said, I've been around the country. I originally from Oregon, came out here to do grad school, and I've made multiple stops along the way. Got back to Oregon for a full-time internship. I was at University of Cincinnati, Gonzaga, University of Arizona, now at Colorado State. So very different locations, different conferences, different levels. I think that for me, there's a few things that I think have made it easier for me to acclimate to those new roles and new cultures. Because I think the one thing with college athletics, right, there are similarities across athletic departments, but I've also learned that there are stark differences, right? The way that we operated at Oregon was vastly different than Gonzaga, and that's different than CSU, right? And so I think acknowledging that each place is different is key. But I think for me, being a sponge first and foremost, and learning as much about the university, the athletic department, who are their big famous Hall of Fame players, right, that you're going to hear the fans talk about. But learning as much as you can about that culture. I think even learning as much about the culture as you can through the interview process as well. If you aren't asking questions about what the culture looks like through the interview process, you're doing yourself a disservice. So I think learning as much as you can on that front end. I think asking questions is huge. I think sometimes, especially earlier in your career, you don't want to ask questions because you want to think that you know everything. But I think that one of my biggest keys is ask the questions. Don't be afraid to jump right in, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. None of us are perfect. I mean, Trista and I have been doing this for a while. Val's been doing it for a while. I'm sure that we've all made our fair number of mistakes. And I think that those are some of the biggest learning opportunities that you have. So I think when you get into a new place, right, jump right in, take initiative. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. I think for me too, building relationships within the athletic department has been really, really key for me. So every place that I've ever been, I try to do my best to jump right in and make those connections, whether that's with, staff that's at the same level as me. And, I've always been in the external operations side of things. So of course, getting to my marketing staff really well, my development staff, the ticketing staff, but beyond that, getting to know as many people as you can, including the coaches. I think when the coaches know that you're invested and that you care about their programs, that really helps you go a long way when you need to tell them no, or you need to ask them to do something. And so I think creating those relationships from the jump is really, really important. I think giving yourself grace too. I think when you get into a new, you're not going to know everything, and you're going to continue to learn. I've been in this new role for 4 months, and it's the first time, as Carrie mentioned, I've taken new roles, but until now, all of those roles were in ticket operations. So I started as an intern, worked my way up to an assistant AD at Arizona, running the entire ticket office, and then most recently moved over into fundraising. And I think that it's something that I'm still learning, but giving myself grace and allowing myself to make those mistakes. But I also think being a great teammate. I've always, if somebody asked for volunteers, if marketing asked, hey, we need to put 10,000 glow sticks out in the stands, you knew damn well I was going to be one of the first ones out there, even as the head of a unit. And so I think that was really big. I think on the building relationships front too, I think it's important, right, to if somebody asks you to do something outside of the office, to go to a happy hour, to go grab drinks with coworkers, try your best not to say no the first time and try to create those relationships from the jump. So I think those are kind of the pieces of acclimating to a new culture, acclimating to a new role that have been really helpful for me. My least favorite part of this question, the balance piece. I think that is, I'll be completely honest, that is something I am not great with. I think it's something I've definitely gotten better over the course of my career, and something that I try to focus on a lot more, because I think I have been in positions where I've felt that burnout, and I've lost the love for a minute, and I think that I had to try really hard to get that back at times. And so I think that, you know, the balance piece is really important. I think you need to find joy outside of sports. I love sports, like you said, right? There's nowhere else I'd rather be than watching a college football game. That is I love it. That's why I work in college athletics. But I think that you need to be able to find joy outside of sports. So whether that's you know, loving to paint and painting on the weekends, right? Like, find something else that you love to do that can bring you some joy. I think when it comes to vacation, I try really hard to take a vacation every year. And when I take that, you know, week-long vacation, I've got my notifications turned off. I've done as much as I can to be prepared on the front end, so that hopefully if somebody has to contact me, it's an absolute emergency. And I think trying to be present in those moments. I also think for me too, to be completely honest, there are times where it's a grind, right? When I was in ticket ops, if we were going to a bowl game, it might mean I was missing Christmas and I was going to be working my ass off for a month leading up to that. But then I think trying to find those moments where you can find that time to recharge and relax. For me, even if it's a half a day on a Sunday, then I'm going to try and be my most present during that time, try to shut off the work and try to be present in that moment. But I do think it's a work in progress. And I think for me, the one thing, I know this isn't maybe like the nicest subject in the world, but therapy. I think talk to somebody. Like, I was really I think avoidant of that up until the pandemic. And then I had some time to like actually reflect and to take a breather a little bit. And I was like, you know, my anxiety riddled self, maybe we should try talking to somebody. And I found a therapist that really, really helped me work through a lot of the things that I was feeling. And so I'm a huge, huge advocate of finding somebody to talk to. And I think having a strong support system too. Like, I know I have people in the industry that I know I can call at any time. And if they're not in a meeting, they're going to answer my call. And if they're in a meeting, they're going to call me back as soon as they can. And I think my family too, like my mom, bless her soul. She's never worked in athletics, but she's one of the hardest workers of anybody I've ever met in my whole life. And so I know that if I really need to vent to somebody or you know, really find that support, I have those people in my life, and I have them in, you know, different capacities. I have people, like I said, in the industry that really understand the business of what I do and what that grind can take. But then I've got other people that I think, you know, can provide a different perspective, because at the end of the day, it's a privilege that we get to work in athletics, but we aren't curing cancer. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that and give ourselves some grace.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey. My students can vouch for this. I tell them that every person in the world should be in therapy, and I actually believe that. So I agree with you. Okay, so before I continue on, I want to check if there's questions from the audience, and we also have some people attending via Zoom. So if anyone on Zoom wants to ask, also let us know. Anybody have questions?
I have a Zoom one if Brittany wants to. So how do you see being a woman as a source of strength and advantage in industry largely dominated by men, especially white men?
And not everyone has to answer every question, so we get through them. So if anyone feels like that's a good answer, doesn't have to be a good answer. If anyone feels like they have an answer, go ahead, Sierra.
I can start. I think Kelsey touched a lot on burnout and what this industry can do to you. And I think that I'm still relatively new to this, but my first boss at America East, I think, knew me better than I knew myself and could see when I was on the verge of breakdowns. And she would say, just take a day, it's fine. Or take a half day, or do what you need to do to get yourself together, because we're approaching championships or approaching whatever it might be for your benefit. Like, you don't need to fall apart. And so candidly, I don't know that there's a man in my office that can do that for me. The level of emotional intelligence that I think women can bring to this space is very important and not to be overlooked. And so for me, I think that's been a huge value. of having female bosses that I worked for.
I'd also say just having females present in the room is really important, especially from like a marketing standpoint. So when I think back to the Under Armour days, like our target consumer was heavily moms who were buying apparel for their kids. And so it was a real disservice to the product process as well as like the marketing process at large to not have that voice represented in the room. You're missing a whole cohort that deeply understood what it meant to price sensitivity and to how to position it, to the superpower of Stefan being kind of like the kids used to want to be like Jordan. Now they want to be like Mike. Now they want to be like Stefan. So like tapping into that has like real bottom line benefit for the businesses that can't be replicated. But I love the emotional intelligence piece. I second that.
So I think just to add on a little bit too, I think from a college athletics standpoint, right? For every school I've ever been at, I mean, probably half or more than half of our student athletes are women. And I love that Sierra's been privileged enough to have really strong women leaders, but I can't tell you to this day how often I am the only woman sitting around at a table where we're making important decisions. Maybe sometimes there's one other person, but I mean, I have had multiple times in my career still to this day where I'm the only woman and there's zero diversity sitting around me, right? But we are representing a very diverse group of population and trying to help, you know, make the best student athletes that we can, prepare them for life after college athletics. And I think that it's important that we have as many perspectives and as many voices in that room. And right now, quite frankly, we need more. We haven't gotten there. We're not even close to there yet.
I'll agree with Kelsey a lot. I'm often the only woman at the table. I will say that my company now, because they've done some radical shifting over the last 3 years in culture, forced, but so that's much better. But as a league, as a whole, in professional sports as a whole, at the executive level, we're still falling a little short there. So, but again, I'll just pick off what everybody says. That, you know, to Val's point, you need diverse perspectives at the table in all realms of business, not just the sports industry. Women have the buying power. And like I said before, this is a business. And a lot of times the women are controlling the buying power in households. I think another thing that, you know, is helpful is, you know, I'm a tough leader, but I am an empathetic leader with that, leaning on a little bit of the emotions. I often look around at my peers, and if they're, you know, sometimes a mature white men, they have their wife at home, taking care of the kids, doing all that so they can focus in on the 12 to 14-hour grind and the lack of boundaries that they like to create or that can be created in these types of environments. And it's always need someone to be in the room and be like, we absolutely need to prioritize that, but there's other things we need to prioritize too. And that's my daughter's recital tonight. So I will get to this later, but for right now, I have to go because that's ultimately, you know, job number one is, you know, taking care of yourself and taking care of your family. But I do think sometimes it needs somebody to speak up other than just somebody in people ops to say, hey, you know, all of these things are really, really important. But for us to all be successful, we all need balance. We all need the diverse minds. We all need to lead with empathy and have some understanding, or we're doing a disservice to, you know, the rest of our teammates.
Great question. Thank you. Whoever asked that. Yes, Natalie.
You're allowed. This question is specific to you, but then I just want to say I'm sorry that you couldn't cancel. You had other things happening this weekend. We'll get there, Burton. I do want to say though, my question, and it sounds like that you've been with the Commanders for more than 2 years.
This is my third season.
Okay, so you were there the last year of the previous ownership.
I was.
So knowing what everybody in the world knew about what was happening in that organization, and we all in business will operate that as a minority person at the table. How did you navigate that?
You know, to be honest, I was one of the last pieces to turn there. So when the former owners, the Snyders, you know, were forced to do through lawsuits and legal actions, change the name and clean up the culture there, the entirety of the executive leadership team shifted, and I was ultimately one of the last pieces to fall. So I will admit a lot of that work I didn't do, but these were all questions of things that I needed to understand the direction to even accept the job, to even understand, because it was very public at that time, well known that that owner had been through a lot, hadn't really invested in the team well, and it looked like a dead end for him. And I still came on at that time knowing he's going to be the owner, but there was some very specific questions I needed to understand about what I was getting into, to your point of understanding the culture that is going to be around you and that you're going to be a part of and that you're going to represent. I was not going to be representing something that I could not believe in. So I ultimately, and I will say one thing about, you know, everybody feels a certain way about the name Commanders to the prior name Redskins. That was also something that was a consideration for me. And I'm not gonna, you know, go either way. I know people. This franchise that I'm a part of is iconic. It's celebrated its 90th season. In my first season, people bleed burgundy and gray, and I mean burgundy and gold, and they may never accept the Redskins name. They may, I mean, losing the Redskins name, the Commanders. But I'm from Anchorage, Alaska, and my father is a professor of anthropology, studied Native Americans. So that was important for me to understand what that stance was, what that ideal was, and what that meant. I do understand the nostalgia. I do understand that some people don't understand why that is painful and hurtful to some cultures. But the idea of the shift and why it had to happen in the feedback was important for me to understand. That owner was forced to change the name. That was not something that he wanted to do. But if he wasn't forced, I would not have probably joined the team. So with that being said, that was an extreme situation of toxic culture. But I can't say that some of the things that I heard about, seen, or whatever don't exist at other franchises. That got put on a pedestal because the community disliked this owner so bad and all this. But that was not, and like I said, extreme. There were some things that were brought up that I heard about later, and I was like, yeah, that happened at my last company, and that happens over there too. So what I do want to tell people is, you know, it's a shift now that we're, you know, we had Me Too movement and all that. We're getting, you know, DEI, and there's more women coming around, but there's still an imbalance here. And there's still some of that actions in sports that you just have to be prepared for. And to Kelsey's point, you have to ask questions and you have to do your research and you have to talk to people. So you have to know that you're getting into an environment, an organization, and a culture that you can be proud of working for.
Yeah, go ahead, Max.
How important and how do you advocate for yourself in this field, especially like Trista, you talked about how like, yes, my work is important, but also like my daughter's recital is important. How do you advocate for yourselves in a field that is male dominated and that moves so quickly that there's kind of the chance of like, or the fear of falling behind?
I've always found the best path is getting an ally, honestly, a male ally that can help give you some air cover, and not being apologetic for asking for a boundary. It doesn't mean you're like, I had this fear that if I wasn't always on, always accessible, to the detriment of my health and my family, that it would be a knock on my ability to like get into the room on the next one. And there was this fear that was like, you know, rooted in things I had seen. But like you said, it's like communicate. If you're not in therapy and don't know how to communicate, again, I second the therapy piece of it. It's really powerful, especially brought into the workplace, of just finding your voice to say, I need off from 5 to 7, and then I'm back on. When I was working on the West Coast with Stefan, we were Pacific time. And the team there was very aware that I was on East Coast and had family. So I really communicated to them, I'm going to be on handling the East Coast business from 9 until 5. And then I need off from 5 to 8 to put the babies down and then have at it like after that. So always providing a solution of your accessibility. But I think back to your question, it's also just communicating really well of how you are going to show up and when you will show up and when you'll be available, over communicating that, and then finding an ally who can like help reinforce that or be your backstop when you do need to like step back for a minute.
I'll just quickly share, I was in a meeting last week with a committee, and it's really hard when you have a committee of 10 to find a time that works for everyone. You basically can't do that. And someone really was trying to find a solution and said, I'm actually serious with this question. Could we meet at 7:30 a.m.? And 2 women said, I have to take care of my kids in the morning and get them to school. This doesn't work. And I was sort of watching the dynamic. And a man who does not have kids kind of was watching this and said, like, that doesn't work. So sort of played that role as like advocating for people who are probably like, well, I'm looking like the one who's not being accommodating because I have something else going on. And I just really appreciated, like, we've had lots of men in our program, because we talk about this a lot, who've said like, well, I don't know what to do. How do I like be the advocate for more women, minorities, other people who haven't had the same opportunities as me? And sometimes it's just like being present and aware so that you can even just be that voice, because that probably did help those others feel a little bit better. Like, it's not just us who can't do it. Someone else was like, that doesn't seem like that's going to work. Let's find something else. So there are ways to do it that are, but you have to be very aware of like what's happening in the organization, in the meetings, in the settings. If a woman is always the one who takes notes in a meeting, it probably means she's not participating as much because she's trying to like listen and get all that taken care of. Maybe once in a while, someone else could say, how about I do that this time? So there's lots of great ways that I think have been like sort of alluded to here that are really helpful for anyone who needs an advocate in a room. So thanks for sharing. Yeah.
I think too, just going back to I think being a proactive communicator too, right? Because I think about me as a leader, if one of my employees came to me as soon as they knew that event or whatever was coming up, and I knew that it meant a lot to them, I would make that work. I think back to an employee I had who was my director of tickets at Arizona. She ran men's basketball ticket operations for us, which, if you know anything about the University of Arizona, it's kind of a big deal. Brings in a lot of money. But it was really important for her to be able to work the Arizona Bowl. She ran that bowl game, and it was really important for her career. And so she communicated that to me, 3 months in advance. And so I had no problem stepping in and running all of her men's basketball games during that, 3-week period, because I knew how much that meant to her. And so I think the communication piece is key. And I think when you're earlier in your career, you may put off that question, right? Because you're scared to ask, you don't know what the answer is going to be. But I think the more proactive you are with that communication and having built a relationship with your supervisors, usually that ends up on the positive side. And I will say too, if you have a leader that is not willing to make those sacrifices for you that are really important, which I've also seen that at a previous institution, then recognize too that may not be the place for you, and that may not be the leadership for you, and that's okay.
I also just want to add one point to that though too. When you do decide on where you want to be and you understand what that culture is, there are sacrifices. And it's going to be very hard for a leader like me if there's too many sacrifices that you're not able to make. So, and that should be communicated at the beginning. Any person that I'm bringing onto my team, to be very honest about what you're joining and what the expectations are. You're probably not going to be at everybody's baby shower. You're probably not going to get to go home every time at Christmas like you're used to in college. And that has to be a part of your decision making as you join the team. Absolutely, we want to be great teammates and leaders and chip in and make sure everybody can have that. But this industry, those aren't promised to you, and that is a decision you have to make if that's something you're willing to sacrifice in your life as you move through this.
Yeah. So perhaps we just do one more question because I'm just looking at the time. I'm assuming this time is accurate, 3:00. Okay. So let's do one more group question, and then we do have this room longer. So yes, no.
Bedroom for fights and drinks.
Okay, do we have like a few more minutes in here? Okay, good. So we'll do one more. We'll move up to another room. If people have individual questions or want to just chat with our panelists here, I always like to leave time for that because they're amazing. And so you should definitely get some quick one-on-one hellos if possible. So I think in the back you had a question.
Just wanted to ask, and anyone can answer. It's such a male-dominated industry and field. Have any of you guys ever experienced imposter syndrome? And if you have, can you share how you deal with that?
Every day. I would say literally all the time. Like I think I'm constantly having to remind myself that I actually. I don't really need the mic either. I can just roll. But no, I think that for me that like that's something, especially I think as I've come into a new role where I was hired into a leadership role in an area that I had never worked in before, right? And I think that's pretty unique in college athletics. Most people aren't able to make a jump from ticket ops into a leadership role within development. And I think that I have often second guess myself, like, wait, do I actually know what I'm doing? Do I actually belong here? They keep telling me I'm great, but all I'm doing is showing them a spreadsheet, right? But then I have to take a step back and realize that no, I am meant to be here. There's a reason I got this job. But I think that is something as a woman in sports, especially, like I said, a lot of times when I'm the only woman sitting in the room and I'm like, how am I the one that's here? But I think that finding your self-worth and working on that internally, but that's something that I work on constantly.
I would also say the anecdote that I've found to imposter syndrome is going back to the asking questions in forums. You will be surprised how the super simple dumb question that you could ask could just reveal so much about the room and get people to really stop talking, and you kind of then get to see your power in that. I think it's one of the most empowering tools to ask questions and to make them super simple. And then it kind of reveals like, all right, this is what I'm dealing with. And oh, they don't know as much. That was just like a lot of like, pomp and circumstance, and everybody's faking it until they make it.
I would say I do. There's a little bit of fake it till I make it, because there are certain circumstances where I'm doubting myself more than I need to, right? And the people around me believe in me, so I can fake it long enough to say that I can be here and get through it. But what I found is I work with a lot of sports that I played softball, and now I've taken over track as one of my championships. It's a circus. I don't know if you guys have been at a track meet before, but there's so many things going on all at once, and the coaches themselves call it a circus. And so what I found is, rather than trying to be in that space and be the meet director and say, I know what's going on, fake it till I make it, what's worked better for me is to say, I don't know what's happening. Talk to me like I'm 5. Explain it to me, please, because I want to understand and I want to do what's best for you, and I want to make sure that you guys have a quality event, but I can't do that on my own. And I found that has worked best with my coaches is being willing to say, I don't know what's going on. I don't fully understand this, but I'm willing to learn and willing to put in the work to make sure that you guys have a good event.
I will say yes. I'm one of those that probably feel an imposter syndrome every day. But what has brought me, and I will say this is for women and men. I feel like I have more confidence if I prepare. Sometimes you don't have that time, so it's important to stay prepared. I also always use a lot of quotes and things. The one I got from LaMelo Ball: if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So you stay in tune and you keep up. You're listening in meetings and you know what you want. But I always feel like I want to be prepared because I don't know the next questions that can be asked. I can be prepared on what I think I'm talking about, but then you're going to get, and what about this? And what about this? And what about this? So I need to dig a little deeper to get there and understand, when I'm asking Josh Harris, my owner, for $2.5 million for some sort of capital project, he's going to have questions and I need to be prepared to answer them. And I need to be ready for a spitball. And it is okay to say, you know what? I don't know that, but I will go get the answer and I will get it back to you shortly. Doesn't make a lot of sense to just spew off stuff that you're uncomfortable with that you don't know. That's probably not the right move. It is okay to say, you know what, I don't have that answer for you right now, but I will get it and get it right back to you. And make sure you do follow up and get it right back to them. Good.
I would also say, the number one thing for me has been faith. Like, whatever you believe in, like, have faith in something, especially yourself. And I think that's what will bring you further than anything else. And then, of course, agreeing with everyone else, but like not being afraid to ask questions and Google it if you have to. I remember like seeing like a TikTok about, it was a doctor that said like he Googles things before he goes into surgery. Like, if a doctor is gonna Google it, like it's okay if you do too. So I mean, I'm constantly like putting people on hold. I'm like, hold on, I don't know. And it's okay to say like, I don't know, and go run to even your coworker. Like me and my co-interns were talking all the time about like, I think that was in our notes, but really not sure. And so like, even though you don't want to bother your supervisor like with a question you're probably sure they've answered already, like if you don't know, you don't know. Like, it's okay. We're not doing brain surgery. So it's okay to like center yourself, believe in yourself, and ask a question.
Okay, so I want to once again thank these 5 women for being here and providing us with so much stuff to sort of ruminate on, think about, figure out how we can apply as we are starting or progressing in this amazing industry. So a big thanks to everyone here. And just logistically, anyone who wants to is welcome to go to, what room is it? The corporate education room. It's on the 3rd floor. 3189. If you will be heading up there, if you have additional questions, just want to say hello and introduce yourself. I really hope that this was thoughtful and valuable for everyone. Thanks for making time for it. And a huge thank you to everyone here.